2022 was, without question, the year of the Steam Deck, and I think this year that was expanded to the point where we can say 2023 was the year of the PC handheld. I mean, think about it. Not only did Asus and Lenovo get into the game with the ROG Ally and Legion Go, but Valve shocked us all when they followed up the Steam Deck from last year with the Steam Deck OLED this year. Not to mention, one netbook, GPD Win, and I and Neo collectively released, I don't know, like 29 handhelds this year? Jokes aside, I've been impressed with the boutique PC handheld manufacturers in the last 12 months. They still have a ways to go to catch up to the big leagues, but for the first time, it feels like they're all trying to consider the entire player experience. They've bought into the idea that numbers aren't everything, because it's not just which AMD chip is inside the handheld, but the entire thing, from the form factor to the software. In 2022, my final hardware review, if you could call it that, was mostly me ranting about how there was very little to set handhelds apart from each other outside of the Steam Deck. This time, I'm ending the year optimistically because that couldn't be further from the truth. We have one handheld that's dedicated to playing first-person shooters. We have the Ally, which is currently the undisputed Windows King. We have a handheld that genuinely fits in your pocket. We have a clamshell that can connect to an eGPU and become a true desktop replacement. And on top of all that, we have the one that kickstarted a revolution in PC gaming with the Steam Deck and its follow-up, the Steam Deck OLED. But which one of these is the handheld of the year? Well, I want to tell you, but before I go any further, you know what I miss? Like really, truly miss. I miss games that didn't have to be the highest budget or be 100-hour open world RPGs, hardcore games that you would replay on higher difficulties just to test your mettle. That's why I'm excited to tell you about today's sponsor, Wanted Dead. Wanted Dead is a love letter to games from the PS3 360 generation, and it's got this sick gun-fu, gun-kata combat system that'll have you looking to go on the offensive. Like, if a group of souped-up soldiers are shooting at you, do you want to shoot them from cover or rush up and rip their limbs off in gruesome fashion? I mean, Wanted Dead lets you do either, but I pick the rushdown fatality every single time. Get in their face, perfect parry their next move, and slice them to pieces. And by the way, developers have just rolled out the first patch for the PC version, taking the experience of this game to new heights. Check out the improved quality of life and gear up for even more enhancements coming your way. Steam players, you get to experience this game-changing update now, but don't worry console players, your turn is just around the corner. Expect the patch to hit your platform in just 3 weeks. Best of all, this game is on sale right now for an impressive 50% discount on Steam till January 4th. There's never been a better time to play the game. Wanted Dead is also available on PlayStation 4 and 5, Xbox Series X and S, and Xbox One, as well as on the Epic Game Store. So why wait? Get your copy now using my link in the description and plunge into the exhilarating chaos now. So I tried to take inventory of all the PC handhelds that released this year, and clearly I may have missed some because there were a lot, but I thought it was pretty cool that I received most of these. That's something that I'm proud of because this is the first time that I really get to be a part of the conversation of what are the best PC handhelds in the entire year. So first of all, thank you to all those PC handheld manufacturers that helped me be a part of that conversation. But thank you to you guys for watching my channel, supporting my channel, and just being there listening to what I have to say about these. That's not something I ever really expected, and it's not something I take for granted. So yeah, I just wanted to share my thanks with you all. So yeah, let's talk about these candidates. First of all, the Steam Deck. I'm going to include the Steam Deck LCD because it still had a wonderful year and it's still very much a viable option and one that you can still buy if you go for the $400 256GB model. Then there's the Steam Deck OLED, which you would get if you buy the mid-tier or premium tier version. Aside from the Steam Deck, the ROG Ally released back in June 13th to be specific, but I'd like to point out that it was announced back in April in sort of a guerrilla marketing fashion when Asus announced the ROG Ally on April Fools, and we weren't sure whether or not it was a joke. At the time, I thought it was pretty smart. In retrospect, I think it was brilliant. It was really, really smart to get the conversation going, especially before anyone had any real details about the ROG Ally. Now, I was pretty critical about the ROG Ally's big press event, and I still stand by that. I think that they just got a little too liberal with fudging some of the numbers that they did come up with. But to be honest, marketing is marketing, and to me, that's all water under the bridge once the product is actually released. Now, the Lenovo Legion Go, that was released on Halloween, October 31st, but I suspect they took a guerrilla marketing approach too, because we first learned about the Lenovo Legion Go from a series of leaks that were reported on by windowsreport.com. And windowsreport.com seems like a great site with apparently a ton of annual readers, but to be honest, I had never heard of them until this leak. But what we at first thought might just be another run-of-the-mill PC handheld, we discovered had some tricks up its sleeve with removable controllers and what we later learned would be in FPS mode. And to quickly go over the output from the PC handheld manufacturers, I counted 7 new handhelds from Ioneo. So at the top of the year, there was the Ioneo 2 and its partner, the Ioneo Geek. Later in the year, they followed that up with the Ioneo 2S and the Geek 1S. And then there was the big boy, the Ioneo Kun, as well as the smaller version, the Ioneo Air 1S. And now we're ending the year with Ioneo Slide. Now, to be clear, you can only pre-order the Ioneo Slide right now. And as far as I can tell, reviewers are only getting their hands on it just as of this week. You know, aside from Taki Udon. Shout out to Taki. And then there's GPD. GPD is a funny one because up until recently, I have not been able to review GPD devices. I was not on their press list, which is totally fine. But the flip side to that is I actually have a bit of a soft spot for GPD because the GPD Win Max was my first handheld before the Steam Deck. So fun fact. In any case, they released 2 handhelds this year as far as I can tell, the Candy Bar GPD Win 4 and a clamshell GPD Win Mini. Now, the original version of the GPD Win Mini did have some heat issues, but they do now have a newer model that uses a blend of plastics and fiberglass to replace the metal casing that was there before, and that seems to have alleviated all of the major heat issues. I did just receive that model, so do look forward to a review of that unit coming soon. And finally, we have One Netbook, who released a One X Player 2, which was sort of a spiritual predecessor to the Lenovo Legion Go. It did not have an FPS mode, but it did have the detachable controllers like the Nintendo Switch. But more importantly, they had the One X Fly, which I felt was the first time that One Netbook was really being intentional with their design, and they honestly came out better for it. So I recorded all of that and then spoke to Russ from Retro Game Core about what I may have missed. He mentioned the AOK Zoe A1 Pro, the 7840U version of the WinMax 2 from GPD, the TJD T101, which we're probably better off forgetting that one. Also the Ioneo Air Plus models, those were the cheaper ones that ended up costing twice as much as when they were first advertised. And then there were the AYN Lokis that also shipped this year. So yeah, shout out to Russ for helping me round out my list. Thank you, Russ. In all, I think that's over 20 new PC handhelds this year. That's almost 2 per month. Now, with those competitors in mind, I don't actually want to do a breakdown or a compare and contrast. I think that would be boring, at least for me. Instead, I want to talk about what other big things happened this year with regard to PC handhelds and the PC handheld community. So of course, the first and most important thing we have to talk about there is video games. 2023 has been said to be the best year for games, despite the fact that it has been a terrible year for the game development industry. But focusing on the games, I think it's important to point out that many of those amazing games did come to PC, and many of the games that did come to PC, I think were either pretty well optimized or they at least considered the handheld/low spec experience. Like the year started with some bangers like Resident Evil 4 or the Shadow Drop of Hi-Fi Rush. Hi-Fi Rush in particular was really nice because that's the sort of game that you want to play at 60 FPS, but it's also the kind of game that you didn't necessarily expect to run at 60 FPS on the Steam Deck, but it does. Ratchet & Clank is a game that went out of its way to advertise that it is in fact going to play well on handhelds, and that's something that they were considering. I think for some folks that was especially astonishing because that was a game that prior to then was one of the first and only PS5 exclusives. It wasn't just PlayStation exclusive, it was not available on PlayStation 4 or PS4 Pro. I have to also shout out Phantom Liberty, the Cyberpunk expansion that came out later in the year, because that's an expansion that we all expected was going to make Cyberpunk a little bit harder to run on the Steam Deck, and it didn't. It made it better. And with that in mind, I have to shout out Armored Core 6 as well. I think we expected that game to run pretty well, but at this point, I'm impressed that From Software is in fact considering the Steam Deck experience. We know that they worked with Valve for Elden Ring, and at this point, they released 2 bangers since the Steam Deck has been released, and both of those play great on the Steam Deck and other PC handhelds. I'm also going to add Baldur's Gate 3 to this list. I know that it has some rough areas towards the end of the game, but a lot of those areas have been patched and the performance has improved considerably. So I think it's clear that they are taking this low spec experience into account and not just saying something like Baldur's Gate 3 is a next gen game that requires next gen hardware. In any case, you can also say almost any indie game like Sea of Stars, Turbo Overkill, Dredge, Dusk HD, and RoboCop, they all took the handheld experience into account. And it's not just because these are by default low-spec games, because some of them took things other than performance into account, like gyro and controller support. And of course, I would be remiss if I didn't mention Wanted Dead, which is a game that ran pretty rough on the Steam Deck, but has seen improvements since then and is now running a lot better. We did also see games that were poorly optimized like Returnal, Remnant 2, Starfield, Jedi Survivor, and The Last of Us. Now it's worthwhile to call out that a few of those did get improved. I would say that they still don't run very well on the Steam Deck, but they do run well on other PC handhelds, and that's something that's in the favor of handhelds like the ROG Ally, Lenovo Legion Go, and Aya Neo 2S. Finally, there are games where Valve stepped in, like Dead Space and the 2.0 patch of Witcher 3. And that's something that's unique to the Steam Deck, where Valve is in control of the ecosystem and they can release an update to the software that the Steam Deck depends on that may potentially fix or at least improve performance and compatibility of games on the Steam Deck. Now, we don't get a lot of data on what games are the most played on PC handhelds in general, but we do get a lot of data on what games are the most played on the Steam Deck, and I compiled that list together, and honestly, there are 10 to 15 games that show up on the list every single month. But even within those games, there is a lot of variety, at least I would say so. So there are, big RPGs like Cyberpunk, Elden Ring, Fallout 4, those games show up every single month. And then there are smaller games like Hades, Slay the Spire, Stardew Valley, The Binding of Isaac. And of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the Survivors games that show up all the time like Potato, Halls of Torment, Vampire Survivors, of course. And unfortunately, my favorite Survivors game has actually only shown up once. Shout out to HoloCure. Baldur's Gate 3 is a game that's been at the top of the list since it came out. So clearly you all are playing that on your Steam Deck. And other games that have shown up here are Monster Hunter World, Resident Evil 4, Street Fighter 6, Cult of the Lamb, Dredge, God of War, No Man's Sky, Hogwarts Legacy is another one that's been there since it debuted. Plus there's also Dave the Diver, Persona 5 Royal, Armored Core 6, and Dead Cells. So I think that really does go to show that even though there are a number of games that really do show up on this list a bunch, the variety that you see in this list in terms of genre, playtime, graphical intensity, it's really quite broad. And I think that's because the player base is broad, right? It's not just that the Steam Deck is for people that play indie games only or people that play RPGs only. It's literally for everyone. Like, who doesn't want to play their games on the go? Here's where I ask you for a favor. Comment down below, let me know what you're playing, because I really want to see the variety from my audience. Clearly we see from Steam Deck in general, but what about the people that watch my videos? What are you guys playing? That's what I want to know. In addition to games, there were a lot of software updates and community engagement around software updates that happened this year for Steam Deck and other PC handhelds. So FSR 2, that was released in 2022, but there were a lot of games this year that added support for it, and that really is a huge deal. It makes a lot of games that are not playable actually become playable. Likewise, FSR 3 did get released this year, and I think we'll see the benefits of that really trickle down next year into PC handhelds. But outside of FSR, let's talk about the biggest update for software when it comes to PC handhelds. It's funny because two of the biggest videos I have on my channel for this year, one of them is my first video of the year where I start talking about SteamOS 3.5 and what is coming down the pipe. And the other one is when SteamOS 3.5 finally made it out of the sort of developer-oriented main channel and into the preview channel. And those two videos are literally 9 months apart. What's more is that we didn't realize that SteamOS 3.5, even when we learned about it late last year, that it was all a precursor to the Steam Deck OLED. The features that I talked about in that first video back in January were HDR, ray tracing, local area network downloads, and startup movies. And yeah, all of those are amazing, but it kind of pales in comparison to what we actually got. We got sliders for color vibrance and color temperature. We got support for HDR and VRR. We got the ability to scale the image so that even a 16:9 aspect ratio game will fit the 16:9 screen. We got better support for external storage, improvements to performance in the shader cache, faster resume from sleep, undervolting capabilities. SteamOS 3.5 was literally a year in the making, but boy, did they deliver on that year of development. In addition to SteamOS 3.5, there were also updates to Ioneo's software suite called iSpace. ROG Ally came out with their own software Armory Crate, as did Lenovo with Legion Space. The commonality between all of these is that I think they realized that you can't just compete with Steam Deck with just performance alone. The software is an important part of the equation to really make it feel like you're playing a handheld and not make it feel like you're taking a PC and shoehorning it into something that it shouldn't be. Of these Windows-based handheld software, Armory Crate is well ahead of the competition, and it does benefit from having a bit of a lead. While it did debut in sort of a messy state, just like the Steam Deck software did, it recently got a really big update and finally did implement gyro, for example, which was a requested feature for a long time. Now, this isn't software, but I should also mention that there was the big micro SD card issue with the ROG Ally. And according to the 6 months later video from Retro Game Core, this is something that is fixed in newer units, and so it may be fixed if you get an RMA if you experienced a problem. But naturally, it's pretty disappointing that they did have this problem in the first place. And hopefully they implement better QA controls so that something like this doesn't happen in whatever their next handheld is. One more thing I want to point out here that is not quite software related is that the community has put together a really good ROG Ally Discord. I'll leave a link to that in the description, but that really is where I get the most comprehensive updates on the ROG Ally. They have like Ally updates that they do every few months, if not more frequently, and I haven't found a better place to get ROG Ally information. Maybe someone can let me know if there is something better out there, but shout out to that Discord because it really is quite good. With regard to the Lenovo Legion Go and Legion Space, like I said, they are a bit behind the ROG Ally, and so their software does have some catching up to do. And in contrast to what I was just saying about Asus, Lenovo has been really, really good about engaging with the community. They're very consistent about posting updates on gaming.lenovo.com, and I've seen those updates come through in the unofficial Legion Go Discord as well. Mirroring the discussion around quality assurance, Lenovo has dealt with a dead zone problem that hasn't really been resolved yet, and so that's something that I'm surprised has not been resolved yet, just like I'm surprised that the ROG Ally took so long to get gyro implemented. So while that community engagement has been great, I think it would be even better if Lenovo was focusing on fixing these issues and getting them out the door as soon as possible. Obviously, we are officially in the holiday season now, so who knows how long it'll be till we see that next update. Clearly, a lot of people are waiting, and some of those people bought this for the holidays. So I do understand those that would be losing patience with Lenovo at this point. I did also mention Ioneo and iSpace. They debuted iSpace 2.0. I'm not going to dive into that here because I think SteamOS 3.5, Legion Space, and Armory Crate are really the big three, but it is notable that Ioneo has continued working on iSpace and that it has gotten better in this past year. Now, the last thing to talk about before I give a final verdict there were a lot of community updates with regard to handhelds this year. One of the most notable things you can talk about when it comes to the community is emulation. Yuzu had a ton of updates this year that really targeted the Steam Deck and other PC handhelds. One of those things is they reduce power consumption overall. And this is something that traditionally is not really a consideration in the PC space, but obviously with integrated GPUs and handhelds becoming so popular, it ended up being something that the Yuzu development team really took into consideration for future developments. Likewise, they also implemented improvements to limit device access memory, which again is helpful for devices with limited memory. They modified the shader cache so that it loads faster, and they kept up with new releases like Red Dead Redemption, Super Mario Bros. Wonder, Super Mario RPG, and Tears of the Kingdom. It was kind of wild to see people playing Tears of the Kingdom on the Steam Deck before normal people could buy it on the Switch. Given that, I should probably bring up that the Dolphin development team announced that they were going to officially be coming to Steam this year, And then we found out that Valve's legal department contacted Nintendo to check with them to see if it's okay if Dolphin actually gets released on Steam. Nintendo obviously said no, and Valve said to the Dolphin team that they would have to come to an agreement with Nintendo if they were ever going to release on Steam, which again, obviously would never happen. So yeah, that was a thing. It was weird, but at least we all still have Dolphin. The 3DS emulator, Citra, also got a huge performance boost on Linux devices back in October. I saw this reported on Steam Deck HQ where they got a 20 to 30% boost on Linux devices, which is huge and obviously so for the Steam Deck. But aside from emulators themselves, EmuDeck had a very productive year. They just debuted EmuDeck for Windows as a beta. They've been working on cloud saves, and they released a tool that'll help you migrate your collection. For example, if you had a Steam Deck LCD and you just bought a Steam Deck OLED and you want to transfer that collection. Honestly, EmuDeck is an amazing tool, and the fact that it's been ported to Windows and they are working on those cloud saves means that everyone benefits regardless of which device you own. Finally, Handheld Companion has gotten some big updates, which is huge for Windows devices. Decky Loader has seen a bunch of plugins and updates as well, which has been huge for the Steam Deck. Cryo Utilities 2 debuted in this year, again, huge for the Steam Deck. And we have a new Linux gaming distro in Bazai OS, which looks to be an alternative to Chimera OS, as well as just Steam OS. There's also been a bunch of progress in hardware and accessories, a bunch of stuff for the Steam Deck, of course, with Steam Deck shells, custom Steam Deck buttons. But also we've seen the expansion of accessories come to Windows handhelds like Mechanism, previously known as Deckmate, come to the ROG Ally, or Dbrand with their skins and their glass for the Lenovo Legion Go and the ROG Ally, and they also announced the Ally Kill Switch coming early next year. So clearly the community is bought in, we exist, we are here, and we are bought in to handhelds and to just low spec gaming to an extent. Which brings me to the end. What is the best handheld of 2023? Well, the best handheld of 2023 is whatever you have. There are some places that do not have access to buy a Steam Deck. There are people that are not going to spend more than $400 on a handheld. There are others still that want a console-like experience and would not possibly be willing to look at anything other than the Steam Deck. And there are other people that want to play Fortnite and other games that are not compatible on the Steam Deck. And if you think all of that is a cop-out, well, yeah, it is, but it's a reasonable cop-out because I think me telling you what my favorite handheld of 2023 is kind of boring. You probably know what my favorite handheld of 2023 is. I think it's more interesting to look at all the progress that's been made in the last year and look forward to a lot of progress being made again next year. Somehow the PC handheld space has both never been better and it's just getting started. Besides, if you think this is a cop-out, let me know in the comments what you think is the best handheld of 2023. Show me that you're not a coward, you're not going to cop out like I did. I hope you've all had a wonderful year. I do still have one more video for you in this year. Look forward to it next week. Deck Gang out. Goodbye.